Hello and welcome back to Learn GeoGuessr, the series in which I teach you about the GeoGuessr meta and learn some things myself along the way. I thought I'd take a step back from more complicated aspects of the GeoGuessr meta today and talk about something very basic, and that's left side driving countries. It's something that most people who are pretty experienced with GeoGuessr will know. They'll know the left hand side driving countries, but for the beginners, it would be useful, I think, to go through all of them and to talk about how you distinguish between each of these countries, because it is possible pretty much to distinguish between all of them. So, I've selected this map created by Fabio, credit to him. I do have one slight complaint about this map. Brazil pops up sometimes, which is not a left-hand side driving country, but it's a great map regardless, so we're going to play through it anyways. And if Brazil comes up, I'm going to just make sure you understand it's not a left side driving country. So let's just play a couple of rounds of this and hopefully we'll get most of the locations that drive on the left. And here we go. Okay, so this is... okay, I suppose let's actually talk about things that we notice about this. We've got a very wide road. Obviously, we're driving on the left, noticeably. You've got a very wide road. And a wide road, obviously, you associate quite a lot with North America, Canada and the USA. But there are two countries that have similarly wide roads, specifically Australia and New Zealand. Australia more so than New Zealand, which is why, on first instinct, I'm thinking this is Australia. But you can also tell the difference between Australia and New Zealand by, for starters, looking at the climate, looking at the vegetation. The vegetation in Australia is going to look a little more tropical, a little more arid in some places, and New Zealand will tend to look a little more continental, a little more like the UK. That you'll see quite a lot of like sheep farms and various things. If you're seeing a sort of wide street suburb like this, you would typically expect this to be Australia. So I'm going to go Australia with this one. We're going to go, let's say, Melbourne. And see if we're correct. We're actually in Sydney, but there we go. First one, we've got the correct country. Next round. Okay. So first instinct is that this is Singapore. And the reason is because the vegetation looks fairly Southeast Asian. I'm talking about these sort of trees that, I don't know the type of tree, but sort of the small leaves, the everything looks very green, very tropical. Other things, another ways to tell this is Singapore. Usually you'll be in a big city, big skyscrapers. It'll look quite like an American city, but driving on the left, of course. It's easy sometimes to confuse it with Australia, like some of the bigger cities in Australia. Another way to distinguish is that I think Singapore specifically uses quite a lot of yellow road markings. And also you will notice there will be some Southeast Asian sounding names, even though everything's in English or in sort of Latin alphabet. I think most things will be in English. You'll sort of see these sort of Southeast Asian sounding names, which is not unusual to see in Australia, but you will see them more often in Singapore. So anyways, we're going to go into Singapore. Like I said, it's pretty distinctive. And we were correct. So hopefully that comes up again so I can show you what the city looks like. Right, so driving on the left, of course. I don't know why I need to say that each time. This is an interesting one because I'm not 100% sure straight away looking at it, but I think we're in South Africa. So to explain, if you go to my road markings video, the Learn GeoGuessr video prior to this, I talked about how South Africa, Botswana, Lesotho, and Eswatini all have yellow edge road markings and drive on the left, and those are distinctive features of those countries. This looks a little more green than I would have usually expected to see in that part of the world. But of course, South Africa is a vast, vast country and does have a lot of different sort of regions, and definitely has regions that look like this. So I think it's South Africa, but it could easily be sort of Eswatini or Lesotho. Botswana tends to look a little more dry, I would say. The other thing that I think South Africa has is it has, I forget which generation coverage it is, and I will talk about that in a future Learn GeoGuessr video, but it tends to usually have like some distortion or like a halo in the top of the image, but I don't know if you can see that here. Another thing to note is actually the sun's in the south. Is that right? The sun looks to be... it's kind of hard to tell. It's quite low in the sky. Anyways, we're going to go South Africa. We're going to go there. We were correct. We were further south, of course, but we were correct. So that's what's important. So next round. Okay, so this should be the UK or Ireland. It's fairly distinctive. I should say, of course, that when I talked about New Zealand looking quite continental, New Zealand does look like this in parts. Sometimes it's easy to sort of confuse New Zealand with the UK or Ireland. The way I would usually do it is road markings are quite different between the two countries or the three countries, so that's usually distinguishable. I would say road quality, you'll see more sort of dirt roads or gravel roads in New Zealand, I think, and you'll see more paved roads in the UK, but paved roads that look quite a lot like this. They're reasonably sort of, I wouldn't say they're really well kept. And obviously the most important thing for distinguishing between New Zealand and the UK or Ireland, that I should say, is sun is in the south here. So that means we're in the northern hemisphere. So that puts us in the UK or Ireland. I'm going to go northern UK. And we were in Northern Ireland, but we were still in the UK. So yeah, Northern Ireland, part of the UK. So that's good. We got that correct. Okay. This is an interesting one. So we are on a sort of dirt road and very blurry footage. I have found this almost always when you get sort of very blurry footage like this on a sort of unmade dirt road. I've found this to be either Western or Northern Australia specifically, usually Northern. So we're going to guess there. Obviously we don't have any road markings and the sun seems actually a little bit off. Maybe the street view is off, but this is obviously a very old generation of Google Street View images. So we should be around there. Okay, we're in Western Australia, so I was wrong about that, but like I said, right country, that's what's most important. But at least it helps you see that, you know, it's either Northern or Western Australia when you see something like that. So, pretty good. We got all the countries correct. And we're going to play the same map again. Okay, here we go. So, like I said, again, we got the yellow edge road markings. And I think the sun should be in the north. Yep, it is. Do we have the sort of halo that we can see? We don't have that. I'm thinking then it probably could be Botswana. I'm going to go Botswana. It looks a bit more dry. That's what's making me think that. And yes, we were correct. We were in Botswana. Parts of South Africa can look like that, of course, but I find that Botswana is a pretty safe guess if you're looking at a really dry landscape. And the yellow road markings, of course. Right. Well, this is the UK. Pretty sure. Trying to figure out where we are. Oh, NW1. That's a London postcode. I think that's... I'm not sure, actually. I'm not entirely sure. Well, we'll just go there. It's... Oh, I thought it was a London postcode. NW1. 2 letters is a standard format for a postcode in the UK. I just thought NW was a London postcode. I was completely wrong. It was Sheffield. But anyways, we were in the right country. Let's forget about that little disaster. Right. Well, this doesn't really tell us whether we're driving on the left or the right, but like we just said, it should be on the left. Poskamladu. I mean, this isn't really a great example of a country that we can easily tell. I mean, it's looking like Southeast Asia, judging by the people. We've got the sea to our north. I mean, I'm kind of feeling like Indonesia here. We've got sort of a Latin alphabet, but I think Singapore is a good shout here, so let's go there. Yes, and we were actually pretty close, 104 kilometers away. It's pretty good. One thing about Indonesia, you'll tend to see, I should have talked about the differences. Obviously, driving on the left, you'll see quite a lot of motorbikes and scooters, or mopeds, tuk-tuks as well. You will see obviously tropical landscapes. Sometimes it's very difficult to tell the difference between a lot of the left-hand side driving countries here. So you've got Indonesia, Malaysia, Thailand. Those all drive on the left. The main difference between them is the languages. So Thailand has the Thai alphabet, and Malaysia, Singapore, and Indonesia can sometimes be easy to mix up. One thing you can do with Malaysia actually is you can look at their road signs. They use the Jawi script on some of their road signs, which is the writing alphabet for Malay. It looks a little bit like Arabic, but you will not see it in Singapore or Indonesia. Indonesian is actually a variety of Malay, which makes it unfortunately difficult to distinguish between Malaysia and Indonesia because their place names and language sound so familiar. But Indonesia does not use the Jawi script, so you can always look for that. So those are some of the ways to differentiate, but as I said, Indonesia and Malaysia, very similar. Singapore, big city, quite similar. And Thailand, you can use the language. Those are the ones that drive on the left. In this part of the world, of course, Sri Lanka and Bangladesh also drive on the left, as does India. India doesn't show up often in GeoGuessr. Japan also drives on the left. Hopefully some of these come up so we can see. Right, so this is Ireland, and the reason I know this is Ireland is because we have slow and then we've got a different language here, and it often is done in italics. So this is always going to be Ireland, so we'll just do that now and see where we are. Well, we were in Western Ireland, but that's a fairly easy way to distinguish. Another thing that you can do, you can see my road marking video, and you can see specific road markings that you'll find in Ireland, which is these dashed yellow lines on the edge of the road. Right, next round, and we are again in Southern Africa. And I think we're just going to go straight into South Africa. And there is the halo that I was talking about that you will see, I think, only in South Africa. So that allows you to differentiate between Botswana, South Africa, Lesotho, and Eswatini. So let's just go somewhere here. And we were indeed in South Africa. And let's play once more. Okay. We're not got much information here, but we saw this in the first round. I think this is Australia. I'm judging by the wide roads and reasonably, I'd say, tropical looking landscape, but not very tropical. Might be wrong, but let's go Melbourne. Yeah, we were in Geelong, but that was correct. Following the same tactics we used before. This looks to be the UK just because it looks very continental, and looking at the just I don't know I know there's little things you can just tell, like the way the curbs are built, for example. I think those are sort of more these sort of segments are used more often in the UK. I might be wrong about that. You might see that in New Zealand as well, but this should be the UK. Could be Ireland. I clear. Well, that was clearly Libya. I thought that was definitely Libya, not Glasgow. No, it was Libya. What are you talking about? Yeah, I clicked on the map wrong right before I clicked the next. So we've scored a measly 206 points for our Libya guess there, but I can assure you I did think that was the UK. Next round. Right. Okay. So I think this is Thailand. And yep, I can see, I think that is Thai. I was just judging by the sort of the trees and the bushes, and also the quality of the road. The quality of the road is I would say reasonably poor. So I think in some parts of Thailand, like northern Thailand, you'd probably see roads like this. Of course, you could see this in other parts of Southeast Asia, but then I think that's Thai. That does it for us. One thing I have found is that sometimes it is possible to mix up Thai and Bengali, which they speak in Bangladesh. They look completely different, but if you're from far away, sometimes it's easier to mix the two up. I hope I'm not about to do that. So let's go for Thailand. We were correct. So yeah, like I said, if you see tuk-tuks and you see, obviously people look a little different between the two countries. In Bangladesh, they'll be a bit more brown-skinned, and Thailand will look a little more Southeast Asian, of course. But obviously the language is a pretty easy way to distinguish, but sometimes it's easy to mix up the two. So that's something to be aware of. Next round, and this is the UK, so I'm just going to go straight into the UK. I'm judging that by the double yellow road markings on the side. This is very common to see in cities. In fact, almost every city will have some sort of road marking like that. So we're just going to guess in the UK randomly, and yep, that was correct. Okay, and I think we're again in Southern Africa, which is a pity because I was hoping to show you some new areas, but we're just going to go into South Africa. It looks like we might have the halo, so we're going to go there, and we were correct. Okay, let's play again. Let's play through again and see if we can get some more left-hand driving countries that we haven't seen yet. The ones that I'm hoping will come up are, well, here's another example actually of our Western or Northern Australia. Very poor image quality, very blurry. So we're gonna go Western Australia this time. We were actually near Brisbane. Oh wow. Okay, I didn't know that was possible, but that's good to know. There are some areas in Eastern Australia that can have that quality footage, but like I said, it's almost always Australia when you get something like that. Right. So this is the UK again, and it's a pity because I was saying I was hoping to see Japan come up, because Japan, well, it's fairly distinctive, Japan, obviously from the language and the driving side, but I was hoping that would come up just so I could show you. I was also hoping Bangladesh would show up. That's about it for left-hand side driving countries. I don't think I'm missing anyone else. Another place that can come up sometimes is like Jersey. That's left-hand side driving, but I think in Battle Royale that counts as the UK. Anyways, let's guess in the UK, and we were in South Wales. We were in Merthyr Tydfil. And next, Drake Clothing Manufacturers. Are we once again in South Africa? I think that confirms that that is a symbol of the African continent. So I think we're probably in South Africa, and we're going to go Pretoria. We were in Durban, but we were correct. Next round. Okay. Okay, like I said, sometimes Brazil comes up, and Brazil is not a left-hand side driving country. So this is this is not a left-hand side driving country, but this is Brazil. And I've seen it come up in this map before, so I'm just going to go in Brazil. But yeah, discount that one. And we're in the UK again. I was hoping we would get Japan once, but it looks like it's not to be. So again, it's pretty distinctive. You know, it could be, again, sometimes can see sort of vegetation, continental vegetation like this in New Zealand, but usually it's the UK, and we can probably confirm it by position of the sun. So there we go, and correct. Right, let's have a quick look at Japan, and let's also have a quick look at Malaysia, and let's have a quick look at Bangladesh, because I want to cover those countries just to show you what they look like. All right, I've dropped us in to Japan, and fairly instantly it's pretty easy to distinguish from everything else we've seen previously in this video. Obviously, number one is we've got the Japanese text, quite distinctive. Sometimes people confuse it for Korean or vice versa. The way to tell if you're not sure is Korea, South Korea, I mean, drives on the right, and Japan drives on the left. So this is an example of Japan in a city. This is, I believe it's Tokyo. And I'll show you an example of countryside Japan. So, well, there you go. There's Japanese lettering on the roads there, but these bollards are quite common in Japan. You've got these yellow sort of bulbs on them. What else can you usually see? Yeah, I think you see these red and white or orange and white bollards quite often. When you get a situation like this, sometimes it is easy to mix it up with some regions in Europe, but obviously if you can see the driving side, there are only a couple of left-hand side driving countries in Europe. That's the UK and Ireland, and this does not look like either, really. It's a bit too mountainous. So that's the way you can kind of tell if it's Japan, is you can use the driving side in those instances where you don't have lettering and you're seeing sort of regions like this. They're very mountainous. On to Malaysia, and as you can see, obviously we're driving on the left, a fair number of like mopeds and stuff. The language does look a lot like Indonesian in places, but what you will find in some places, not all the places, but what you'll find is Jawi on some of the signs. It looks a little bit like Arabic, but it's not. It's Malay, but in its own alphabet. And this is something you won't see in any other left-hand drive country. Obviously, if you're in Kuala Lumpur, I'll just quickly go to Kuala Lumpur. You'll see it looks reasonably similar in places to Singapore, but the signs are a little different and the road markings look a little different. And I would say Singapore is a little more modern looking, in my opinion. So yeah, this is Kuala Lumpur, and I think it's a bit different in terms of how it looks from Singapore. And I think you see more blue road signs, where I think Singapore has green. So I did want to talk about Bangladesh, and of course, like I said, sometimes very easy to mistake with Thai, but other times I would say it's pretty clear that you're dealing with a different alphabet. And in cases like this, obviously you're seeing I think they're rickshaws, quite common in Bangladesh, and it has a little different of a look to Thailand. In many places. So fairly easy to distinguish, obviously also drives on the left. And the last place in southern Asia I want to talk about actually is Sri Lanka. So let's finish up with Sri Lanka. wanted to talk about that briefly. I haven't seen it too much recently in GeoGuessr, but it does come up. I think the main way to distinguish again in the comments is with the language. So let's zoom into the language. I believe this is Sinhalese. Correct me if I'm wrong, any Sri Lankans in the comments. I'm not expecting there to be, considering there's only like 20 of you who are watching at the moment, max. So not expecting any Sri Lankans yet. But as you can see, the alphabet is a bit different. You got much more sort of curved, like circular lettering. So it looks reasonably different, I would say. But one thing to note about Sri Lanka is it does in places look quite a lot like Bangladesh in the cities, and it does look in the rural areas quite a lot like Thailand. So that's something to bear in mind as a good sort of secondary guess if you're thinking you're in Thailand and you haven't seen some language and you know you're driving on the left, but it gives you more guesses. So it could be Sri Lanka. And actually, I should briefly touch on India, which is obviously another very major left-hand side drive country. So the thing with India is it doesn't have Street View. Now, I'm not sure of the history of this. Maybe I'll try and find that out at some point in time. But it doesn't come up often in Street View. And the only way that it usually comes up is if, for example, I do this and I drop us in to a photosphere. And obviously there's no easy way to tell this is India, of course, but usually the only way that India will come up is if you have a photosphere. And sometimes it will happen, but it's rare. It's very, very rare. So it's just something to bear in mind, that it can come up, but it's rare. And it is left-hand drive, but like I said, very often photosphere and you won't see what side of the road you're driving on. So we've already discussed the southern African countries that drive on the left and how to identify them, but there are two other left-hand side driving countries in Africa that we do need to mention that also come up in GeoGuessr. These are the only other two, Uganda and Kenya. Both of them, luckily, have very identifiable features that you can use to recognize them. So let's go into Kenya first and discuss. You can go anywhere in Kenya and you'll see the same features on the Google car specifically, and that is this snorkel sort of thing, this little thing sticking up from the car. Sometimes it's on the right and a little bigger, but you'll always see this and only see this in Kenya. And if you're driving on the left and you see this, you know you must be in Kenya. The other thing you can see is these bars. If for whatever reason you can't see this, but you can see bars and you know you're driving on the left, you'll also be able to tell that you're in Kenya. There are bars in other African countries, but they drive on the right. So Ghana has the bars, for example, but it drives on the right. So those are some easy ways to identify Kenya, and we can go anywhere in Kenya and we should see the same thing. There we go, there's the snorkel again, and there's the bars. So there we go. So let's go into Uganda now, and we can go again anywhere in Uganda and look at the Street View car again. So it's a bit blurred in this image, but what you'll see is a white Street View car with wing mirrors. They should both be viewable, so if you see that and you're driving on the left, you should be in Uganda. And I can zoom out and go anywhere else and go into Street View and you'll see the same thing. Another thing that's worth mentioning about Uganda and Kenya, they don't really have the yellow edge markings that the southern African countries have. So if you don't see yellow edge markings, you should be able to identify yourself as being in Uganda or Kenya if you're driving on the left. And there is one last place we should mention that drives on the left, and that is Malta, small island country in the Mediterranean, and luckily very distinguishable from specific features you can use. So let's go into Street View, and you'll see immediately quite a lot of the buildings are sort of like Mediterranean, sort of sand, tan-coloured buildings, and fairly narrow streets in a lot of places. And if you end up in Malta and you'll see you're driving on the left, it's very easy to tell where you are usually, because as you can see, this sort of environment you haven't seen anywhere else in this video in any of the countries previous. So like I said, you should easily be able to tell you're in Malta. So thank you very much for watching. I covered in that video, I think, all of the major countries that show up in GeoGuessr that drive on the left. There are obviously other countries around the world, specifically a lot of island nations that drive on the left, and I didn't want to focus too much on them at the moment because they're very rare to come up in GeoGuessr, and it's not necessary perhaps to know them all, and for beginners it's better to just learn the main ones. So I hope you found that useful, and I will see you again in the next Learn GeoGuessr video. I'm thinking it'll probably be something to do with Slavic languages. I'm working on a map at the moment that looks at Eastern European, specifically Slavic languages, and looks at the differences between them. So hopefully I'll be able to give you a good video about the differences there, because that's one of the major things I'm struggling with at the moment when Eastern Europe comes up. So thank you very much for watching, and I will see you again next time.